Good afternoon, everyone. That was a tough pair of speakers to follow. And let me just say that I think Pete and Bob have such a clear view of what the issues are. A lot of what I say is really going to just add to what they had to say. I'm going to speak briefly now, but I just want to say that many of you know Bob well, I presume, and I've never met anybody who is more astute about the issues of how to invest wisely in science and how to make sure that we have impact. So I hope you all take what he said very seriously, what both he and Pete said. And actually everything they said touches on exactly how we're thinking about the challenges, particularly research universities face going forward. I want to use my time effectively, and I think what I will speak about right now is what I learned. This is sort of like what I learned on my trips to Washington. And as you heard, I started as president last year. I was actually informed on New Year's Day, 2024, that I was going to start as president the next day. And that was interim, and later they removed the interim title. And I like to say, or I did say it's a huge honor, but in fact, I also knew nobody else wanted to do the job. So, and they showed good judgment in many ways, but they were also wrong in many ways, because this has been a crucial time for our universities, and I really believe that the crises that we have faced in the recent months give us the opportunity to rethink some fairly important issues and to re-examine ourselves. So as I said, I started January 2nd. I think my first trip to Capitol Hill as president was that month. I've made 11 trips to Capitol Hill since then. And I've met with close to 200 representatives and senators. And when I say I met with them, what I really mean is I listened to them. Just like when I meet with our alumni, I listen to them, and our students, and our faculty. And the messages, I think, are really important to understand. As you might imagine, especially if you look at Bob's description of how we got here and his concerns about authoritarianism, this is not just about, we shouldn't only ask, are these attacks on universities justified? What we should ask is, why was it attractive to attack these universities? And why use a tool like cutting research funding as a way to punish us for claims, for example, that we did not pay adequate attention to anti-Semitism, or that we were ostensibly violating the law when it came to college admissions or how we hire people? Why did these kinds of attacks work? And I want to add, I think Pete had mentioned about the great bargain that it is to hire people to work on research in our universities. Well, Vannevar Bush was very forward-looking at the time that not only did he write The Endless Frontier, he was thinking about the design of the government-funded research enterprise. And the American enterprise was deliberately designed by Bush with the assistance, by the way, of then Harvard President Conant. But they looked at the European nations and how they funded research, and by and large, it was independent research institutes. Bush's argument was that if we partner with universities, we can take advantage of the facilities, the talent that's there, and have basically a symbiotic relationship, not to mention the value of involving students in the research enterprise that was not always a prominent feature in European research institutes. It was a brilliant model, and we were the envy of the world, I dare say, as NSF and NIH were created and grew and grew. And they may have had their problems, and by the way, don't get me started on indirect costs. But we probably do bear a fair bit of blame for not being able to tell the story very clearly of what they were paying for. And that's why it was so easy to misrepresent what the universities do with these funds. And I think everybody in this room knows this, but I hope that you will repeat it to the people you come across. Yes, all of us, most of my career I've been funded by NIH, and most of us, I believe, would be willing to do that work, that research work that's funded for free. But it can't be done for free. And actually, the money that the federal government gives us is not a gift, but it's a payment for services and products that we deliver. Just as if the Department of Defense buys Humvees or tanks or whatever, they pay for that. The NIH, the NSF, the DoD, et cetera, they pay for universities to conduct research, and we have a series of deliverables that we bring to the table and that we're actually obliged to perform on in order to get that funding. It is amazing to me that what is known so widely within academia can be repeatedly misrepresented in the public, and we're in a better place now. But I want to get back to what I heard, and it included claims that the indirect costs are basically slush funds for universities. And incidentally, one fact I give is that for Harvard's research, 40% of it is funded by our own internal funds. 40%. And it happens in my distant past. As a junior faculty member, I did a study of indirect costs at the behest of the VA. And so I got to understand that better. But basically, universities, even if they get full indirect costs with NIH grants, they lose money. And that's why philanthropy, or in the case of academic medical centers, margins on patient care, are almost always needed to be able to conduct research. Even with generous government funding, and I really don't mean that in any sarcastic way, the government funding is generous, but it's not sufficient by itself. What I heard, though, repeatedly from both Democrats and Republicans was disappointment. And this is particularly true in 2024, disappointment with universities not living up to what they represented and certainly not their aspirations. It started out being about anti-Semitism. And incidentally, I'm telling you about what I heard that was about Harvard. I would say 90% of this was really meant as a condemnation of top research universities, particularly private research universities. And then it morphed into some other issues that bothered people, that we weren't consistent when it came to applying discipline. There were mentions of DEI, and there were a lot of complaints that we lacked viewpoint or ideological diversity. I quickly learned, after hearing this, that arguing about whether these claims were valid was not a winning strategy. Yes, I know it seems blindingly obvious, but in fact, it was not a successful strategy, in large part because there were usually elements of truth. And to quibble about whether they had the facts right, and very frequently the facts were wrong, was not going to persuade anybody that that we took these issues seriously. So we began at Harvard to try to address a number of the issues, recognizing what we saw as legitimate, not necessarily in the terms that our critics were putting forward. But then it was once the Trump administration came into power in January, this turned from a discussion about our failings to actual threats. And all of you, I'm sure, were as shocked as we were that they decided to cut back on research funding as a major instrument of control. And in the case of Harvard and the other research universities, there was one obvious reason. That accounts for virtually all of our federal funding. So they wanted to use an instrument that was actually not really related to the issues that they claimed motivated them, but it was an available tool. And I see I'm running out of time, but I just want to say that what we learned through this also was that our efforts to tell the story about the harm to the country at first seemed unsuccessful, but ultimately we actually have data showing it made a big difference. And so one of the things I hope we'll talk about more is what we need to do to make the case not only for the federal and university partnership in conducting research, as you just heard about, but how we actually change the whole narrative about what it is that universities, what academia does for the country. And I'll say that at the beginning of our troubles, which really started in the fall of 2023, I talked to wise people. And we talked about how we make the case for the value of what universities do. And we were told, we've done that for years, and it clearly isn't working. Fast forward about another year with multiple university and society efforts to tell the story. And we find out that the truth is we weren't doing enough of it. So I don't think any of us should be cynical that whoever they are so disappointed with universities that we won't succeed by telling the story. We actually have data from our own efforts, like when we sent out my letter and the lawyer's letter rejecting a proposal put forward by the Trump administration in April. We changed our website and told the story about science at Harvard. It got ultimately millions of hits. And we also have evidence that it was taken up by the press, and that's only the Harvard example. We can succeed. There's much more that I hope we'll discuss, but I do hope that when all of us leave here today, that we don't think everything is hopeless. We don't want anybody to win politically by attacking universities and the research that we conduct and the ways that we train the future innovators and future leaders of our country. Thank you.
So I'm Michael Crow from Arizona State University. I thought I would take a somewhat different tact, and that is to try to, in my 10 minutes, get an idea into our heads that we could think collectively about that could be somewhat at the root of some of the issues that we're facing at the present stage of the evolution of our democracy. I agree very much with Alan's point and my own battlefield experience in the same trenches of trying to find a way to make the case for the universities, trying to find a way to make a case for public investment in research. If you boil down the anger and the resentment, there are very disappointed people, very broken-hearted people, and politicians that don't know what to do about it. Half the people that start college in the United States never graduate. They have debt that they can't pay back. They have debt that they can't pay back. We haven't seen 4 to 5 to 6% sustained economic growth year after year after year for 60 years. We have not seen that. We had manufacturing jobs go from 50% of the economy at one point to 10% of the economy now. We do the design. The iPhone is designed in California, but it's not made in the United States. The geniuses, as Bob was talking about, that could build billions of chips, or billions of transistors on a single chip where the transistors are made up of just a few atoms each, in which we don't really comprehend or understand how it is then that very sophisticated thing is then going to be made somewhere else. And the old core of the country, the manufacturing core, the people that built things and made things, well, they got, as some politicians have said, hollowed out. I'm not going to belabor it because I think many of you would say, well, there might be something to that. We could talk a little bit more about that. I want to give one short story and then give you 3 things that I think are happening. The short story is this. In 2011, there was some discussion about adding a new institute to the NIH. I don't remember if it was the 25th or 26th or 27th or what the institute was. The editor of Nature magazine called me up and said, I'd love you to do a summary of what we should be doing at the design level relative to adding yet again, the third, approaching 36 institutes in the NIH. You got 2 weeks. I said, I got this job as the president of this university. It might be tough, but I took a couple weekends and wrote out a story, and they printed this article on how to design the NIH going forward. I thought it was pretty well thought out. I had a number of people take a look at it. I said there should be 3 institutes, not 27 institutes. 1 institute should focus on knowing everything that we can possibly know so that we can make ourselves have healthier and longer, successful, happy lives, so that we could take on mental illness, so that we could take the pain and suffering that we see around us everywhere with cancer and mental illness and all of the other diseases that are out there. We should have every fundamental understanding of all the biology, all the physics, all the chemistry, all the psychological aspects of that possible. 1 institute. A 2nd institute should focus on technological solutions that could produce from that fundamental knowledge access to the same quality health care for everyone, because those are not the same things. Fundamental science and fundamental understanding is not the same as providing the solution. Drugs that cost $15,000 a month. Technologies that are only affordable at hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. It doesn't mean that you don't have to have some of those, but it means maybe we should focus on technological solutions or methodological solutions or ways in which we could lower the inability to have access by everyone. And the last institute, I said a 3rd institute, focuses on nothing but lowering cost. We spend over twice the amount of our economy, twice per capita, for healthcare outcomes of any other industrialized nation in the country, in the world. Twice, 2 times, at least 2 times as much per capita. We're not in the top 25 in outcomes. So I put that article out. It also got covered, Alan might remember, as a Boston Globe Sunday morning article on the Sunday paper. I got 6,500 hate email messages. You're a lunatic. When you moved from Columbia and went to Arizona, somehow you went insane. You've been listening to these psychos that live in Arizona. And one guy said to me, he said, I'm relatively certain that you're John McCain's illegitimate son. I said, my mother and he were born the same year. They never met. It was somewhat astounding to me, and it's been a consistent thing that I've seen from time to time when you try to design something that suggests there might be a way to accelerate doing more science, but with that science produce outcomes that are of greater value to the Republic. So here's my 3 comments. We have a very serious evolutionary dilemma in the emergence of our democracy. We have 3 fundamental processes that are going on at the same time. But however, they're going on at different speeds and in different languages. The first is the evolution of the democracy itself. We have this baby democracy, 250 years old since the Declaration, less than that since the Constitution. As we heard from our esteemed jurist earlier today, there's complications relative to interpretation of this and this and this. That's a process which is moving slowly, and it's just gotten started. It's a slow democracy. That democracy didn't even give us heavy funding in universities until after 1940. Total federal investment in research before World War II was minuscule. It was nothing. We stepped up under Bush's leadership, and during World War II, we proved to the Republic that we could do all these things. And so this baby little democracy, without very much forethought, said, why don't we give these academic jokers every single thing we can possibly give them, call it the Republic of Science, let them operate on their own, and they will deliver back to us 3 things: health security, economic security, and national security. By the way, do we have those? Well, we have them more than we did, but we don't have them to the extent that people want. Second, the second clock is the people themselves are evolving. The citizens in the democracy. They're evolving, unfortunately, faster than the democracy is evolving. social pressures, social change, cultural change, internet, all these things, changes in the workforce, changes in teaching, changes in learning. And so they're evolving, and there's a disconnect going on between them. And then the third, before I run out of time, is science is advancing. Science is advancing at light speed. We've lost all contact with either the people or the democracy. All contact has been lost. Biological knowledge doubling every few months. We're working on quantum theory. If you read The Rigor of Angels, we've been thinking about quantum for a long time, but now we're going to build some quantum stuff at 10 angstroms. We're going to start getting down below that, start dealing with field effects and all kinds of other things along the way. And so, as Bob was saying and as others were saying, we don't understand how to communicate. So we have 3 clock speeds. The democracy itself moving slowly and deliberately constrained by the present design of the system. The people who are evolving faster than they've ever been able to evolve, who are becoming more and more disgruntled with the democracy itself. And then science, which is leaving everyone in the dust because it's just moving so fast. So what do you do? One of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Phil Kitcher, philosopher of science at Columbia. And I'll try to read just a little bit of what he said. The aim of science is significant truth. The aim of science is significant truth, not just truth. Significant truth. And in democracy, the significance is determined by the people. It doesn't mean that you don't pursue fundamental research for the sake of knowledge, that you don't pursue what we need to understand about black holes or quantum or any of the other unbelievably complex things, dark matter. We have to understand how the place works. But we as academia cannot continue to think about the fact that it's just about this republic of science that was designed by this slowly emerging republic, this slowly emerging democracy, which is becoming disconnected from the people, while we're jetting off at light speed across the universe with all the things that we're discovering. We have to figure out what are these significant truths. We have to figure out what of the things that we can do will be most beneficial to the success of the democracy. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So, being a Southerner, I'll start off with the opening, let's be honest. Sometimes it doesn't lead where we hope. But I think when higher education is under attack, we need to recognize that our future as a nation is under threat. And we need to think hard about how it is that we respond. And we've heard it many times, that if we just told our story better, which we need to do, and more frequently, which we need to do, all of our problems, whether it's enrollment or fundraising or government and public support, would be solved. But I'd like to suggest that it's not just about telling our story and how we're telling it, it's what story we're telling it, and it's a question of what story we're telling and what story we're writing on our campuses. So often when we talk about the purpose of education and the value of education, certainly from my perspective as a liberal arts college president, it comes down to the way in which this extraordinary development that happens in the life of a student while they're on our campuses. And that we learn, for example, what it means to be more fully human. And we've said these kinds of things for eons, and they happen to be true. But that's not enough, I think, for the nation as a whole. Education at its best really deepens who we are and our ties to humanity. But what we have to be clear about is how and why this is indispensable for our society's growth and development. So education, we know, is a human universal, the need for education. This is a timeless need. Higher education in itself is a very finely honed version of this universal feature of human societies. And higher education in America is a peak form of this for a few reasons. The first is that we leverage talent globally, across people and all of our diversity, but also because we try to leverage ideas globally. And that really means across disciplines and domains of knowledge. And what this does is that it sets the stage for creativity and innovation. And by creativity here, what I mean is multiplying possibilities for accumulating knowledge and perspectives, then connecting them, testing them, letting them weigh one against the other before you prune them in favor of identifying viable models and solutions. And this requires real training. And I think this is crucial to the conversations that we need to have. It's not just about research, the pinnacle of what we can achieve. It's about how we get people there. And it's about really cultivating synthetic and evaluative forms of intelligence. A great liberal arts education, in my view, does this because it provides the ability to really deftly move across modes of thinking and kinds of knowledge and open the paths of creativity. So yes, higher education is about personal growth, but it's about more than that. It sets the stage for a range of creativity and innovation across the economy and across American culture. And this is one reason why people feel that they really have a stake in what goes on our campuses. And that's the flip side of this sort of aggressive scrutiny and the hostile scrutiny that we're now undergoing. So this takes us to the story that we need to write on our campuses, right? So that we can tell it truthfully and tell it well. Because the reality is that the vast majority of Americans are not going to be our students ever in higher education. They aren't now, and they're not going to be in the foreseeable future. But what we do on our campuses has to matter to them. We have to be able to explain and demonstrate how it is that the stage that we set for creativity on our campuses goes on to benefit the world. And this is our collective task. And we need to ask ourselves if our institutions, as we have currently constructed them, really are doing their job of fostering creativity and innovation. And I think there's some problems with that. If we're going to do this well, we have to be clear what we're not doing. We're not curating ideas, we're not curating ideologies, we're not taking ideological lenses to what happens on our campuses. Creativity does not require that you curate knowledge. It requires that you open up access to it. It also is going to require that we give up our investment on our campuses in advocacy culture. And I think that this is something that's very deeply at root in areas of the humanities, but it goes far beyond that. We are not advocates for ideas. We have to bring forth our ideas, bring forth our best solutions, and let those ideas speak. When we hold on to a culture of advocacy on our institutions, we are holding on to fixed opinions. We're in a world that's moving way too fast for that. We're in a world where opinions move around the globe, to paraphrase Mark Twain, 10,000 times faster than facts can move. Our culture is also moving way faster than our systems of evaluation can on our campuses, like tenure. Tenure is not the problem. Tenure is a crucial feature of our system of academic freedom. But what we are doing on our campuses way too often is we're enabling the calcification of ideas. And that's calcifications of ideas in departments and programs that never speak to one another, and that where the individuals in them speak such specialized, rarefied languages that they cannot cross divides. That actually stifles innovation, because if you and I only speak the same technical language together, our ideas are become more and more proximal and less alive. And I think at every level of the educations in which we engage, we need to break some of these silos. Think about how it is that we communicate with one another. We have to break down these silos of specialization. Because when we live only in these narrow worlds, we are
inevitably going to be outdated and outmatched by the solutions by the problems, the scale of the problems that we have to solve, and by the questions that we want to answer. If you look across fields, some of the most extraordinary discoveries happens when the lens of one field is taken to the problems of another. And that happens when we're very open in our teaching, very open in our communications and the world around us. Innovation and creativity also come when we open up our discussions so wide that narrow ideologies and orthodoxies wither in the fresh air, and the currents of crosstalk and exploration. And my biggest worry right now on our campuses is not solely the threats that we are under from outside forces. It is the ways in which we are closing our doors to things that are much more exciting than what we give room for to happen. And I think what we need to do in the future of higher education is crack those doors wide open in our department structures, in our disciplinary structures, in our academic structures, and let new ideas breathe. Thanks.
I want to, while the audience is formulating, I'm sure, many questions of their own, I'm going to pose a few that actually get to much more of the basic philosophy of higher education. It's something that the APS, but also many people are interested in. Because there's been a lot of talk about how does higher education, how has it in the past and how can it today, contribute to the development of an informed citizenry through especially pedagogy in critical thinking. How do we teach critical thinking? Is it still worth teaching? Why bother? Gabrielle, you started out, well, actually you circled around this as in some of your remarks. And so I'd like to draw you out. I'd like all of you to address this, but I'd like you to start. And how do we now, given the tools that we have, but also knowing how the human mind works and how important it is for individuals to experience critical thinking on their own, how do we approach the teaching of critical thinking?
So I think we have to start with slowing things down for our students. They're coming in after an education in which they have oftentimes not been asked to read an entire book in any sitting. They have not written anything longer than 2 or maybe 3 pages. And their basic analytical skills when it comes to mathematics and science have been constrained by curriculum that teach toward a set of standardized tests that we can do worse and worse on year by year. In slowing things down for our students, what we need to ask them to do is not to defend their opinions, but to listen constructively, to evaluate based on data and sources, to compare ideas rather than advocate for them. I think we do a terrible job. I already said this before, but we do a terrible job because when you advocate for something, you're leading with your opinion. You're leading with a commitment, which you're not leading with a goal of enlightenment. And then finally, I think that we have to ask students to engage face-to-face, and I know this is unpopular in many ways, asking of one another questions and waiting for the answers.
Yeah, I'll take a different sort of scaled notion. We're at this interesting juncture where our technological capabilities, our software coding capabilities, going back a couple hundred years to Ava Lovelace and all the way to where we are now, where we've built this machine that could possibly help us solve a problem that we in the academy, except for designing and building the machine, haven't been able to figure out, and that is how to scale critical thinking, how to scale the things that we do at the institutions. And so a tiny fraction of the population is actually able to attend a residential college. A tiny, tiny fraction of the population. In fact, as a percentage of the population, it's gone down dramatically over time. And so what we have to figure out from those of us that are part of fully embedded, immersive learning communities of faculty working on the core of knowledge, faculty organizing how to do critical thinking, how to enhance communication, how to produce really capable people is how do we instill in both the institution and the individuals that are a part of the institution a responsibility for everyone else also? Or how do we also build tools, devices, and Harvard and others in projects that have been done over the years have done some of this. How do we then find ways to allow people to then also participate in critical thinking? And so if you pick that one topic, if critical thinking is so essential, which it is, and only a few people end up having it, we're going to see an accelerated bifurcation of human outcomes. That's what we're seeing now. We have the people in the upper third of personal incomes, their rate of incomes are accelerating beyond anything that anyone's ever imagined. In the bottom third, it's stagnation, negative outcomes, negative lifespan outcomes, negative income outcomes, negative educational attainment outcomes. And so the academy has to figure out, using all of its genius, how do we do more with what we have? How do we educate a few more people with what we have? And then how do we reach out to others? And then how do we also do things that we're doing them in a way where critical thinking, really critical things for our own species survival, become essential to our evolutionary progress. And so a little bit of a different angle, but I think an important aspect.
Alan?
Well, I have a number of ideas about educating the public, but I'll just stick with our residential students. And in our case, when you ask about teaching critical thinking, I just remind people that we have about a third of our students are undergraduates. So the rest are professional and graduate students. And it's a somewhat different question about how you inculcate critical thinking in those two different groups. But I would also say that there's another way to put your question, which is, what are the barriers to ensuring that they are as well educated in critical thinking as they should be? Mm-hmm. And, if you go to our faculty, I bet you there's not a single one who would say that they don't teach critical thinking, that that's just embedded in the teaching process, it's understood. Yet, you would undoubtedly hear from some faculty that our students are different than they were in the past, particularly if they've been teaching for a long time. So what are the barriers to really teaching critical thinking? And this actually relates to the broader issue of why higher ed is under attack. And Gabby, I think you were getting at some of this. One of the issues has been that students were not open to ideas that disturb them in some way, the way they had been in past cohorts. And this is something I hear almost universally from the faculty. And we look at this as kind of a speech issue, that people may feel attacked if they hear an idea that possibly threatens their identity. And so part of this is the association of the ideas with identity rather than looking at the ideas from something of a distance. So that's one of the impediments. There's also fear about speaking openly. And the fact is, when we talk about speech issues on campus, it's hard to see how you can promote critical thinking if people are constantly asking themselves, do I dare speak and give this opinion that other people might disagree with? That is really, in my view, a generational shift. Now, I could go on and on about things we're doing about that, but we started implementing changes last year that are already showing some effects. I'm not claiming that solving those problems ensures that everybody will be a critical thinker. But I am confident that if you don't create those conditions, it will be very hard for the university to inculcate the critical thinking habits that all of us take for granted.
Thank you very much for those answers. I now want to see, I hope there are some eager hands in the audience and some good questions awaiting. Do we have, because I certainly have many in my pocket. Yes, we have one up there. Please state your name and where you are from. Okay, sorry. There we go.
I'm Barbara Yatzak from Berkeley, and I have a question to Alan. You piqued my curiosity when you said, we are doing some things that are showing some effects. Can you tell us what those are that are helping with the critical thinking of your students?
It's a very good question, and I'm going to give a very brief answer, but I'll be happy to direct people to websites where we describe what happens. Harvard being so decentralized, we have different efforts in just about every school. It starts with our recruitment materials, actually, that we send to admitted students in the college and in multiple schools that basically say, come here if you want to be made uncomfortable, and if you want to grapple with ideas that you may find disturbing that may cause you to question your beliefs. So sending a signal about what type of person we think will thrive in our academic environment. We actually have training and orientation programs in every school at Harvard incorporate a version of this. It's also tied in, by the way, with education about Title VI discrimination issues. Because of the different ways that speech so closely relates to it's actually the mechanism by which discrimination so often occurs on campus, whether it's anti-Semitism or other forms of bias and hate. And we train the teachers, and for the college, we actually train grad students for how to create an environment where you can have open discussions and engage in critical thinking. And I have something a little embarrassing to say, that in the course of our dealing with the various kinds of complaints that people identified about teaching at Harvard, we found out that in some places there were faculty who largely taught without any kind of evaluation. That's making too strong a statement. But let me just say, if you were a business school professor and you looked at what happened in some of the other academic units in the university, you would say they aren't seriously evaluating the teaching there the way that we do at the business school. And I say this from having experience with 2 business schools. There's an attention to the quality of teaching that has been very much refined in that setting, and it has not been as systematic in others. And actually dealing with that, looking at the quality of the teaching, goes a long way, because the real issues do have to do with, are you creating the conditions for people to learn critical thinking?
We have another question, I know. Yes, go ahead, please. Your name and where
Just making sure my microphone works. Bill Hook from Springfield, Virginia. You talk about critical thinking, and maybe part of the problem is waiting until students reach college is a little late for developing a society that's good at that. And so could you say something about K through 12 public education and maybe what universities could do to advocate, in Bob Kahn's way he was speaking, to advocate for improvement in that? Thanks.
So one approach that we've taken on the spirit of that is to, one of the things that we've done in the 23 years I've been there is to dig out all the force fields around the university and put them in the junk pile. Those things that then allow you not to have access to this or not to have access to that. So we have about 60,000 K-12 learners that are digitally linked to us, gaining access to things that they don't have access to in formal learning activities that then work on really important concepts that might be difficult to teach in some middle schools or some high schools. And then we also built a series of advanced learning tools to help people to learn abstract things in particular, and then make those available to millions of learners. Our faculty, many of our faculty are heavily engaged in these things. We have people that are helping them to design them. So we decided to take those things that we have as the core principles of the university, the things that really we are really the best teachers of, or the best carriers of the message, or the theories or the techniques, and then reduce them down into methodology so that they can be made available to whoever wants them. So we have about 25 million learners a month coming to these assets that we have outside of the formal courses that I was just mentioning. And that demand is accelerating beyond anything that we ever could have imagined, because we just threw out all of the little force fields around each department or each school or each aspect of the university.
Yeah, I would just quickly add there that what Alan was suggesting around how we do admissions is an important part of this, because the chasing of this highly selective institutions does have a warping effect on how it is that students are educated. And we see this in the state of California here, for example, with the way in which the admission standards for the UC systems become the teaching standards and the student success standards in high schools, right? That if you don't have this set of classes and you don't have these grades in them, then you're outside of the eligibility sphere for the top echelon of state institutions. The way that selective institutions have approached admissions has done us no service in terms of multiplying the irrelevant parts, I think, of what it means to be an exceptional student, like participation in a range of extracurricular activities like Model UN, and away from actually the skills that we want our students to come with. So, for example, one of the things that we're doing is taking as a screen, do students want to and show aptitude to work collaboratively with other people to solve problems? And that is the student that we're looking for at Pomona College, because I feel that what we can do as part of our secret sauce is to help. Our country as a whole, in my view, does not have a free speech problem. We say whatever we want to whomever we want, whenever we want it, as loud as we want. But what we don't do very well at all is work with each other, especially people very different from ourselves, in order to achieve shared necessary goals.
I just want to quickly say, look, there are obvious tools we have to influence the teaching of the types of students who apply to our universities. But you're really asking a broader question, which is how we influence the teaching of students more generally. And in our case, we do that through our education school, which has partnerships with high schools, mostly in the Boston area, but also more broadly to try to advance that. But I do want to put in a plug also for endeavors like the Khan Academy. And Sal Khan has been working very hard to build in AI features to get better and better at offering this online education that actually can monitor student progress. And you'd think critical thinking is actually a harder skill to measure in that context, but that's exactly the kind of problem that they're working on. And of course, that gives them wonderful opportunities to scale to millions of learners.
Yes, right here in the front. Did I miss something?
David Hollier, Berkeley. It's often complained that the leaders of American higher education have not worked together more systematically to lead the defense of higher education and science and scholarship and learning against the attacks that are being made on it by the federal government. I've heard it said many times that the AAU, the organization of the R1 universities, could have taken more vocal a lead on this. I'm wondering if our panel agrees that this is a problem, that our university leaders could act more effectively together to defend things, or if this is just a false concern and the people that are talking about this are looking for the wrong things.
Anyone want to?
Years ago, when Roger Bagnall and I were on the faculty at Columbia years ago, there was an article in the New York Times about universities. This was in the late 1990s, and it said, where have all the leaders gone? And it happened to show a picture of the then president of Columbia, George Rupp, in his full Harvard Divinity School robes, like he was flying, like a knight, and the question said, where's the Charles Elliots and the so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and these other people? And then the article went on to say that between the faculty and the donors in this group and that group, they'd beaten leadership out of the university presidency as a functional thing. And so I'm a big advocate that university leaders should be able to be not the leaders of a company or a corporation, anything like that, not that kind of institution at all, but there is a responsibility for leaders to act in leadership roles, to work together and to try to solve problems, taking their strength from their faculties and their ideas from their faculties, but still being able to be leaders. And that's not present everywhere.
Maybe I could just say that you asked a very direct question, basically, about should they be cooperating more and working together more. I think it's fair to say there's more of that occurring than everybody knows about, number one.
I've seen this guy more in just the last few weeks.
Yeah. But frankly, for the AAU, you just have to remember the common denominator is these are leading research universities. But there is a very big difference between different institutions and how much autonomy presidents and faculty have. And so let me just say, not every university president can actually act with the degree of independence that I've been able to. And I do have a board that I report to, but it's very different from some other boards. And the amount of consensus there is among presidents who I've come across, and I'm mainly speaking about research universities, is much greater than meets the eye. And the tactical and strategic considerations that they have don't usually become very public, but you just have to recognize that they are balancing many, many different considerations. And so the fact that you don't see all of these visible signs of universities banding together does not mean that there are fundamental schisms.
I'd simply add that I think the AAC&U has been doing, I think, quite an excellent job of bringing presidents together. We do, in fact, meet very large meetings. We've met several times in the past several months, and there is, I think, a great deal of fellow feeling across all of us. I'll say that what has been, I think, a challenge in past and the range of other organizations is really the diversity of institutions which are engaged. And that's geographic diversity, right, where there, as Alan is saying, there are folks who cannot speak as in the same ways as others of us. But I also think there has been a tendency to be willing to throw parts of higher education under the bus in ways that have not been helpful. And to say, oh, well, it's the problem of that kind of institution or the problem of this kind of institution and not the problem at my school. And I think that is where we have certainly made mistakes.
Where's our next question? Is it in the middle here? Yes. Please state your name and where you're from.
Will do. Mohammed Obeid, Shenandoah University, Virginia. My question is a little anecdotal for Michael and ASU, but I think there's a counterpart for the other panelists. In light of the challenges we heard today from the previous panel, Bob, for higher ed, as well as the impending demographic cliff, can you speak to what role do new emerging programs or initiatives can have for those that are even speculating about the role of higher ed in the first place? For example, at ASU, like Dreamscape Learning and others.
Yeah, well, what I can say is that we're attempting to evolve our institution intellectually through the design of our schools and our programs. We're attempting to reach out to the public in new ways across all things. We've divided the university's output into the academic enterprise and the learning enterprise. The academic enterprise is the faculty working in academic pursuits in new design configurations. We don't think universities are too replicant of each other. They're too much the same. If we had more variety among the universities, I think we'd have more meaningful impact across the population and across the need for knowledge. I mean, who knows? I mean, it could be that we really needed this much perspective relative to the knowledge that we created as opposed to this much. And so I'm of that view. Then the other thing that we do, and the second thing, is that we took every asset that we have a project called the Atomizer, where we're taking, for instance, 6,000 digitized, highly evolved courses developed by our faculty, and we're breaking those down into tens of thousands, 20,000, 50,000 component learning parts that any person could find a way to use that as they try to find some way to drive themselves forward. So we're trying to be of greater service while staying true to being an AAU university, doing large quantities of research and so forth and so on, by using technology to empower us to be more impactful for more people. So we're mounting these up. We created a new way to teach the 3 basic introductory courses in biology. Now have a virtual reality lab. About 50,000 people have taken the virtual reality lab. There's the students that come in the least prepared. They're obviously prepared enough to be at the university, but they don't understand the abstract ways that biology is taught. We see up to a 40% learning improvement for them, and then 2 grade levels enhancement for people taking biology. Now we're making that available to middle school students, high school students, everyone, everywhere, everything that we can do. So that's sort of the approach that we're taking, is work on the core of the core, the full immersion on-campus university, and then use technology for everything that we can to make some of the aspects of what we do available to more people. So that's probably the largest initiative that we have underway.
Either of you have anything?
Another question. One up here before. Where are we? Yes, back.
Rich Schifrin, Indiana University. I wonder what the barriers are to promote critical thinking when the greatest part of our educational system is based on memorization.
That sounds like a good one for you, Alan.
The greatest part of our educational system is based on memorization. I don't think that's what I've been seeing on our campus that much. In fact, if there's a typical complaint I hear, that there's not enough of that. So, but are you referring to in secondary education is so much based on memorization?
Yeah, this wouldn't apply probably to the elite universities, but in the great majority of our society, and certainly in before universities, the emphasis is always on memorization rather than critical thinking. And I'm not sure that goes away entirely at the university level at all universities.
Yeah. So I'll take a crack at that with a quick brief anecdote. So I have a son who is in high school as a sophomore, and I was doing their curriculum day last year in his first year. And the most exciting class, there were 2 great classes that I attended. One was one where parents and the students sat together with fossilized teeth for 20 minutes, and we're describing the fossilized teeth and figuring out, which set of teeth were older, right, phylogenetically. And the second class was at the end of the day, it was the art class, where the teacher gave each one of the students a basket, they put out a big basket of limes. Every student on the first day of class had to choose a lime, look at it for 7 minutes. Then they had to draw it and then return the lime to the basket. And then the teacher, as the quiz, had them find their original lime. Every one of the students could do it. What those 2 exercises have in common, again, are what I started off with this idea of slowing down learning, right? And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that we have to, throughout all of our curriculum, actually engage in creative production. That starts with observation, but it's also manipulation of objects, generation of ideas. And I would wager that one of the worst things that we've done in K through 12 education is pull the arts out of it, because I think that the skills for observation, the ability to engage collaboratively with other people, and the exercise of creativity are things that our students desperately need. They're losing just rapidly, and they are making our country less well prepared for innovation and right now and in the future.
I'm going to take Chair's prerogative to ask the last question, because I'm acutely aware that the seniors who are going to be graduating in May and June have had a hard life so far, right? They finished high school during COVID, and they haven't exactly had an easy run of it in the last 4 years. Each one of you will be asked to give a commencement address somewhere, possibly at one another's institutions. What are you going to say, Alan?
Okay, I don't mean this as a cop-out, but my experience the last 2 years included major speeches I gave. I totally rewrote the day before because of emerging events. But actually, on our campus, I can't predict what's going to happen the rest of this year. The spirits are very high, and it is much, much better than it was even a year ago, and certainly better than it was 2 years ago. So I can't tell you what the topic will be. I can't tell you exactly what I will say, but I can tell you it will be upbeat unless something very disappointing occurs, which could happen.
Mike?
Yeah, well, what I would say, so of our 80,000 students pursuing degrees on campus, then we have 110,000 students pursuing degrees digitally with us, so just about 200,000. We've never seen more positive energy than we're seeing now. So we were able to stay operational during COVID. We were able to use COVID as an unbelievable instructional opportunity. You know, it's kind of weird when you're reading things about what people are saying about universities. We're like, where are they talking about? What are they writing about? So, you know, we have kids from 166 countries on campus. We have massive religious, cultural, linguistic diversity, economic diversity. And for the most part, knock on wood, you know, people are getting along, people are moving forward. They have the aspirations of the 21 and 22-year-olds that are graduating as undergraduates now are unbelievable. I mean, and then they're only superseded or made to seem like not as much as the incoming first-year students that we have. I mean, so there's a lot of like geezers or something that are writing these stories about what about what they think is going on at these institutions, and it's just, you know, there's issues, there's this, there's that. You know, we had every complexity that the other major universities had, but they're not shaping who we are or what we are. And it's going to be very positive.
Great. Indefatigable optimism. Do we have more of it?
I will tell them that I'm incredibly proud of them. I'm proud of who they are as human beings and the commitment that they bring to each other at their very best, to each other's well-being and to each other's joy. And I'll tell them that one of my great hopes for them is that they maintain the humility to keep learning.